years after what we in the United States often call the Vietnam War, well, 40 years on, there's now a festival talking about the diaspora of Southeast Asia and sometimes specifically the Vietnamese experience. Our guest now, co-director of the inaugural San Francisco International Southeast Asian Film Festival, Viet. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Now, you weren't around 40 years ago.
Almost. It's my 39th birthday next week. Thanks.
Great.
Yeah.
You and your family came to Southern California out of Vietnam when you were 4 years old. What was that experience like, and how did that experience shape you as an artist in the film community?
It was huge because, exactly 40 years ago was the end of the Vietnam War, or the American War, but it was also other military engagements in Southeast Asia, Laos and Cambodia, which oftentimes we don't think about. It was, my parents and I were boat refugees.
So boat refugees.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Half the people don't make it. My mom and I escaped. And we ended up in Thailand, a refugee camp, and then we ended up in Southern California. So it was a tough experience, just acculturating and assimilating. But I think, and also growing up, I didn't see any images of myself. I wanted to be blonde and tall, that kind of thing. But I'm not. I'm short and Asian. But finally, I think there are more diverse images in media, and I think that's why this film festival is important.
Mm-hmm. You said that half the people who tried to escape Vietnam in those years during the war and after the war didn't make it. Did you lose family members, loved ones?
We were lucky. Some of my family members, stayed behind, but we know many people that just were not as lucky, and it was traumatic. So I don't actually remember that much, and so oftentimes the memories I have of that time or that period is through, films, mass media, right? So I wrote in this essay, I have no memories of the Vietnam War, but it's mediated, and oftentimes I think in the U.S. our memories of other places is also mediated through films, and so yeah.
Is your mother still alive?
Yeah, she's alive. She's living in Southern California. I'm supposed to go see her in a week.
Does she talk about the war? Is it difficult for her? What are her do you talk about it? I mean, 4 years old is that period when you have probably vague memories. Is it difficult for her? Did she lose family in the war?
I think she lost, my grandmother died early on. She talks about it. I mean, I grew up with these stories, and I didn't necessarily know how to reconcile them. If I ask her, she'll tell me. But other families, I think these stories within the region, there's not as much discourse, or their family members don't necessarily have students. I also teach that they say, oh yeah, my parents never talk about it. But I think it's also not just the war. I mean, there are other stories about love, about modernization, about kind of family relationships that are affected by these movements.
Right. Now, as a Vietnamese American, does it bother you that sometimes, and tell me if you think this is wrong, that the instant touch point for any conversation with you goes to, oh, tell me about the war?
Right. I think it's sensitive. I think that's, when I teach or talk, I think, I always say, what are your stereotypes about Vietnam? And either it's war or rice paddies, or, I've gotten, oh, is there electricity? That kind of thing. So, as in with any place that we're not as familiar with, but I'm, quite familiar with, I think there's misconceptions or stereotypes. It's overdetermined. But then, there's a lot of great things. People come back, a lot of tourists, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
I started this segment talking about the quote-unquote Vietnam War because having visited Vietnam twice myself, I know there that that's not what it's called there. It's called the American War.
Exactly right.
But something that surprised me and has surprised other Americans who visited, specifically in Saigon, is what is perceived of as a friendliness towards Americans. Is that some sort of stereotype that's been sold to us over the years to make Americans feel better about going back to visit Vietnam? Or do you think there is a fascination with America?
When were you there? I was just curious.
In the late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah. I think there's a genuine openness and, welcoming. We're glad to have people come and they're interested. I mean, there are a lot of international folks there. Given that they're, maybe you went to the War Remnants Museum. It used to be called the American War Crimes Museum. So they changed it to make it more palatable for American tourists, right? So I think it's a vexed relationship and sensitive, right? But then, I think there's a lot of enthusiasm and love for just people coming.
Right. What do you think, 40 years on, is the greatest misconception about Vietnam? You said some people ask you, oh my God, is there electricity?
I think that there's connections between wars. There's always like discourse around the wars in Southeast Asia and the wars now, right, in the Middle East, right? So many articles, and there are a lot of misconceptions or connections between the two. But then also, with the film festival, I want to draw connections between wars then, wars now, and then also the wars on our streets, and then also beyond, this discourse of war, just thinking about other stories, right, that are related, love, queering, these traumatic narratives, thinking about other forms of relationships, not just militarized ones, right? Because it's so determined.
Right. So this film festival is called the San Francisco International Southeast Asian Film Festival.
There's a lot of syllables.
There's a lot of syllables in there. I'm sure there's an acronym in there somewhere that I can't wrap my...
I see.
I see. Okay,
right.
You see. Very good.
Yeah.
There seems to be a lot of LGBTQ content in that. Was that purposeful or just kind of happened?
No, it was purposeful because as one of the co-directors, we consulted a lot of experts in the field, but we decided, again, right, beyond this discourse, because it's so heavy and overdetermined, that we were really interested in thinking about these other queer relations, LGBTQ, right? And then also these narratives, these linear narratives aren't just like these, really opening up these stories, right? And opening up kind of diverse stories.
But there is non-gay content and gay content as well throughout the festival.
Yeah,
how many films all together?
There's 9 feature films and 22 shorts. So it's over, the festival is 3 days. We have a party on the 20th, November 20th, and then the festival is 21st and 22nd.
Great. Well, we have 2 films here that I'd like to take a look at. I believe the first one is called Finding Fong, and the second one is called My Big Gay Love. So let's...
Big Gay Love, yeah.
Big Gay Love. Let's take a look.
Rất mất tự ti cái này nhé.
Thì sau này mình mài nó đi, quan trọng gì trước sau thì người ta cũng sẽ biết.
Bởi vì cổ chị dài ấy, cái chú trên cơ quan ấy bảo là cổ chị rất là xinh.
Ăn tiền uống tiền hoặc cùng kiêng. Có thứ suy nghĩ là không chỉ học hành. Cứ suốt ngày còn như là trên.
Đa là con trai tự nhiên bây giờ uống tóc rồi.
Không quen hả?
Nó chưa quen.
Chưa quen thì dần dần rồi sẽ quen.
Bây giờ là thành cái mẹ thật rồi đấy. Bây giờ em xem chị là con trai hay là con gái đấy?
Con gái.
Let all your friends become Greek gods.
Didn't you notice he was hitting on you?
He was? Oh my.
Mom, you come back another time?
I get it. You're gay, and you need some hot and heavy man-on-man action. But you don't have to shove it in my face.
We had sex.
Congratulations, it's about time.
Is there something you don't like about me?
What do you mean? You're like sex on a stick.
Sex on a stick. That sounds very painful, but I'll take it as a compliment.
Why are you attracted to me?
I can ask you the same question. Why are you attracted to me?
But you know what else is whack? I think he's cheating.
What if the person you thought you cared about most isn't the right one?
Bob, what are you doing?
I finally found someone who loved me and I ruined it. I hate myself so much right now.
Bob, I love you.
There are some things in life that you just cannot foresee. One of them is happiness, and where it's bound to be, it seems like just when you give up, then it finds you.
This isn't the Castro, Bob. Gay life isn't a big gay parade every day.
Anything you've ever wanted to be is inside of you.
Like a little gay love.
No, like a big gay love.
That's charming. Yeah. So, I remember when I first moved to San Francisco almost 30 years ago and working with the Frameline Festival, a lot was made over the idea that a community doesn't really coalesce until it sees images of itself in art. You know, we've had almost 40 years now of the Frameline Festival, I think, maybe more, I'm not even sure. How important to the Vietnamese experience, the Vietnamese diaspora, the Southeast Asian diaspora, is a festival like this?
I think it's huge. We've gotten emails and interest from international filmmakers. Certain film communities were showing Chantali by Matido, who's the first Lao female feature filmmaker, and you know she's screening her film at Cannes all over the place. But only has that industry been emerging, right? So there's now a Lao new wave cinema, Lao cinema, and we're featuring another film that's a sort of omnibus. And so it's only actually a handful of filmmakers that are building this community, but it's really hugely important that, you know, it's developing. Also, same thing with Vietnamese cinema. We also have experimental Filipino shorts. So this dialogue, having it come overseas with a lot of artists from overseas, diasporic artists, but then also local artists, quote unquote, in Southeast Asia, I think there's a lot of interest and attention. So we're building a sort of critical dialogue, not just in the Bay Area, but then internationally.
Right. Has it been hard raising money for this?
Yeah, I mean, it's a labor of love.
A labor of love, that's a way of saying it's hard to raise money. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, we've had a lot of generous sponsors, university sponsors, some community sponsors. So we're just spreading the love.
Right.
Yeah.
In our last few moments, talk to me about what you would like audience members to take away from this, whether they're gay audience members, non-gay audience members. You know, what would you like the overall impact of the festival to be, specifically on, I'd say, non-Southeast Asian, non-Pacific Islanders, non-Vietnamese people, white guys like me? What do you want us to take away from this?
Well, my inner white guy, yeah, I think there's a lot of connections that different communities can draw from. So the stories will be resonant regardless of, you know, whether you're Caucasian or Southeast Asian, queer, or, you know, trans or straight, that these kind of stories about love or, you know, difficult family relationships, horror, documentary, that there are certain themes that connect us. Yeah, and I think that's the bottom line.
Great.
Yeah, no pun.
No pun. I got it. I got it. Thank you. Yeah. We've been speaking with Viet Le of the first ever San Francisco International Southeast Asian Film Festival. I look forward to it, especially my big gay love. Yeah. Thank you for watching 10%. I'm your host, David Perry. We'll see you here next week on Comcast Channel 104.